Hello, everybody. Hey, Lance and Autumn. Thanks for joining me here. We are here live on Reclaim TV to talk with Lance and Autumn about a course they taught and some tools they were using and some AI related tools. And I'm really excited to chat with them. One of the tools we'll be talking about a little bit is a tool we've focused on Reclaim TV before, which is OpenWebUI. And one of the things we've mentioned is how it would be interesting in theory to use it to get a little bit of control over some of these tools and how you're using them. And one of the reasons I was so excited to have the two of you on is you all did it, and at least seeing how that works and what it meant, what it didn't mean, so that's why I'm excited to chat with you. But before we get into that, I'd love if you all could introduce yourself first. So maybe Autumn, if we could start with you.
Hi, I'm Autumm Caines. I am an instructional designer at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. I teach part-time at College Unbound, and most recently for the University of Minnesota, I teach courses in like digital citizenship and tech and society, that kind of thing.
Thanks. And Lance?
Hey, y'all. I'm Lance Eaton. My current title is Senior Associate Director of AI in Teaching and Learning. Right? Long title, have to take a deep breath. At Northeastern University, and also part-time instructor at College Unbound. Prior to this new role that started 2 months ago, was the Director of Faculty Development and Innovation at College Unbound, which is also how we were, I think, excited to be able to get in and dig into a opportunity like this for me and Autumn.
Yeah. So can we start with what is the course? You all co-taught a course that we'll be talking about. So what is the course?
So I taught a class at College Unbound for a while now called Digital Citizenship, and then we changed the name of it to Tech and Society. Lance and I were talking to one another. I was like, I love that class so much, but so many things are happening with AI, right? Like a lot of things are changing in that class. That class was a lot of nature of the internet, history of the internet. AI is embedded into a Google search now. Like a Google search isn't even what it used to be, right? So, both Lance and I do a lot of work in AI stuff. We see each other in these different podcasts and blog posts and things like that. And so, he was like, yeah, I think that'd be a great direction to take it in. And if you have any interest, I wouldn't mind jumping in there with you. And so, we teamed up to kind of redesign this course as I believe is still tech and society, right, Lance? But then we just said special focus in artificial intelligence.
Cool. So I guess just kind of maybe this is a question only for me, but whatever. This is I'm the host right now, so
Sure.
I'm also kind of curious about the name change from digital citizenship to tech and society. Is that just why?
Yeah, so that was really me talking with some of the leadership at College Unbound about what would most resonate with students. And we were noticing that some of the students maybe didn't really get the course just by the name,
Sure.
And so I wonder if that I remember at one point in time, I had a little bit of a pet peeve when I was doing this kind of work, that digital citizenship was often something that was used in a K-12 environment. And it often had a focus on internet safety, right? Don't put stuff out there. Be concerned about your footprint. Don't do this. Don't do that. It was very focused on just protecting yourself, right? And I've made a case that in a higher education context, you kind of have to take maybe some more risks as an adult, right? As a professional, putting yourself out there a little bit more, maybe even if it's a LinkedIn account or something, right? But usually folks who are adults are a little bit, they just come at it from a different perspective than children would, obviously. So maybe that was it, but yeah, the name change was so that they could maybe resonate with students a little more.
Cool. Yeah, and I suppose when we're an adult, we expect folks to understand the risks when they exist, right?
Yeah.
So Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, I think we probably what is College Unbound for folks who aren't familiar with that too?
Mm.
Sure, I'll jump into that. So College Unbound is a younger college. It's about 15, 16 years old. And it was created kind of with this focus on adult learners and how do we engage with them? How do we think about students who either started and stopped out because of life circumstances or institutions weren't there to really support them in who they are? And so it's a nonprofit. It got the right to grant degrees, I want to say about a decade ago, and then got accreditation from NETCHI, basically the accrediting body in the New England area, in about 2020. And really it has this program that uses a bit of cohort-based learning, project-based learning, in really working to make sure that our adult learners can get credit for life experience, right? Our average age student is 37 years old. If they've done project management for 5 years, like why do they have to take a course on it? Can they create a portfolio that demonstrates their learning? So it's really trying to blend those things together. And while a lot of the courses, like the one me and Autumm taught, are taught online, although this was a synchronous course, so we met weekly for a certain amount of time for the course, and they offer asynchronous courses. Their cohort courses typically face to face, and so it's the one course they do take face to face, and we have locations in Providence, Philadelphia, Chicago, Newark, Chicago, Seattle, and Greenville. And when we offer that, when we have those classes, we provide childcare and dinner. Because again, if we're dealing, 70% of our students are caretakers, parents, etc. And so, like, really trying to make sure we can fully support their learning.
That's awesome. So with that in mind, how is technology and society situated in college? Is this a course that optional course? Is it required? Is it in a particular program or area?
Yeah. It's an elective in the my brain is already forgetting some of the curriculum pieces, but it is an elective, and among the, I think, sciences, math and sciences, and students have to take a certain amount of credits within that space. So this was one of the courses that was offered.
Cool.
So it does fill the science requirement. There is a science requirement for the program, but you can choose lots of different,
Sure.
classes that whatever's offered.
Awesome. Okay. Well, with that, what types? I mean, can you tell me a little bit more about the course? Like I should say, this iteration of the course. You all had this focus on AI. What types of things were you hoping students would learn or get from? And what was the focus, I guess?
So if you know me, then you know that privacy and that kind of thing, right, is always a big deal for me, especially when I'm in a place of power, right? When I'm the teacher and I'm like, go do this thing. So go sign up for this account, click that box that says that you're going to agree to the terms of service and the privacy policy, right? Like, a lot of people don't think about that kind of stuff. It keeps me up at night. So, so we started with privacy. That was a big one. A go-to assignment that I always have is to have students actually read and socially annotate privacy policy. After usually some information or discussion, conversation about, well, what is a privacy policy? How do you read it? Because you don't read it the same way you would a magazine article or even an academic article, right? Something like that. So we talk about that a little bit. But then we dove in more into like how this new technology is impacting our world, how it might be impacting labor and job prospects and copyright, those kind of things. So yeah, we had a good number of reflections around how AI is sort of impacting the world around us. What were the big pieces that were important for you, Lance, from the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one piece of it was just like from when like generative AI first came out, and it's something you and I have been discussing over the years. God, it's years now, right? Of like these tools in students' hands. And kind of a sense of, particularly early on, the hesitancy. And so I was excited for this opportunity to have students starting to engage with it and like learn from them. So like that to me is always an important opportunity within this. And then really thinking about like what can they see about these tools in the places that they're at? Because again, we're dealing with adult students, and I don't want to make as much of a distinction from like traditional students, but people who are in the workforce or have been in the workforce for years. And so really interested in kind of what they're bringing into that, like how they're making sense of these tools. Are these tools showing up in their work environments? We had some students who were like, yes, I'm using these regularly. And so I really found that to be like an important piece of this, and particularly for our students who their projects, so all of them do a project. So from their first semester, they're identifying like, let me take a step back. College Unbound only has one degree. It's organizational leadership and change. And so the idea is that their project is the like demonstration of that, right? So like they have their courses in their learning, but like what's the output of that to show like I don't just have the theoretical stuff, but I can do this. And so I was very interested in starting to see if any of them were thinking about this in the ways a tool like this might really help them with those projects. And just to be clear, those projects are often community-based. They can be focused on education, social justice. Some of them, many of them are starting businesses, so it can be entrepreneurial or nonprofits, things that impact or have relevance for where they live. And so that to me was like a really interesting, like, where can they take this?
Yeah, it's really cool with that context in mind of that's the degree is organizational change and leadership and change. Demonstrating critical thought around these tools is probably the best thing that they, can they think, do they understand what impacts may exist? Really powerful, honestly. Okay, so with that in mind, I am interested to hear a little bit more about what types of AI tools you all used here and explored. I mean, you've already mentioned a little bit of you had and actually I should say, but even before this, I'm curious, did you all annotate a single privacy policy, or is there a few? Would you be willing to share what one?
Yeah, I believe we annotated OpenAI's, right?
Yes. Yep.
Because that's like the big one that, sure. So we didn't require that students use any one particular system. What we did was we said, there's so many systems out there. You go choose the one that you want. And if you're worried about security and privacy stuff, and if you just, want to play a little closer and tighter to things, we have this system that we set up for you. Mm-hmm. And yes, we will be able to see all your chats. And yes, we will be right. But like, if you're just using it for this class, we're hosting it with this company called Reclaim Hosting. It's open source stuff that we put up there. And when you're done with the class, we're shutting the system down. We're not going to share your information with anybody. We're not going to sell it to anybody, anything like that. Right. So, if you have concerns about OpenAI, especially after, you read the privacy policy and annotate it, right? If any of that gives you pause, maybe you trust me and Reclaim Hosting, right? A little bit more. And you're still trusting OpenAI, right? But you're just trusting them under a business account instead of under a a personal account. So we know that the business, the privacy policy around business and things like that are when you do it through an API call, they're not going to be training on the information that you put in. I think it also maybe gives them a little bit of a, a little bit of a different approach to things, a little bit of a different barrier. So
yeah. So you all, I'm hearing focus probably mostly on large language models, or did you cover like generative AI for image creation and stuff, or is that less of a focus?
Yeah, we. I think we were mostly focusing on the text generative, but we did. I mean, we did a exercise. It was both an exercise in helping them think about bias in these tools that was focused around like AI imagery, and it was actually something I learned from Mahabali, and like me, her, and Anna Mills were in a conversation where Mahabali is just like, go to ChatGPT and put in family having a picnic at the park. And like all three of us were doing it. And like Maha's in Egypt, I'm in Rhode Island, and Anna is in California. So like we're pretty spread out and we're in like lots of different spaces, whatever, but like we kept, wondering if there's other things feeding the system, but like we kept all getting typically families of color at the park, and there was usually a rainbow of some sort in and around. It could be a flag, it could be a frisbee, and all of this is to say like we were getting these really like interesting images, and so I wanted to somewhat recreate that. And, back to Maha's point about like one of the easiest ways to really understand about bias in the tools is to start with the image generators. And so that's probably when in the class we dug into it the most. And I know there was like one or two students who were interested in that and using that for like their business, but we didn't really. Actually, we had one of those students was using like image and sound, and like he was pretty advanced. Like I was wanting to know what he was doing because he was using it for his music business. So yeah, I would say we stuck mostly with with the text, mostly just because of the amount of time that we had. It was just hard to like go across all of them.
Yeah. Well, in the image generation, exploring bias in that is so interesting because the first time I encountered a thing like that was just with search engines, right? Just search for doctor. How many of them are old white dudes?
Yeah. Algorithms of oppression, right? Sophia Noble.
Yeah. So exactly. So it's interesting to apply that exercise, and it's still very useful, I would say. To this different type of technology. So with the large language model stuff then, so you all encourage students to use either ChatGPT just with an account, with their own accounts, or I don't remember. I don't know where we're at right now. Sometimes you need an account, sometimes you don't on that stuff. And then you also had a offering of OpenWebUI running on Reclaim Cloud, which for folks who don't know, we do have other stuff on OpenWebUI on Reclaim TV. You can go look at it, and where I've set it up and kind of talked about what its implications might be and how you could use it. My understanding is here you all were using OpenWebUI as a front end and then using API keys from OpenAI. So the requests are still going to OpenAI, but as you kind of alluded to, Autumm, it's very different in terms of how Well, it actually comes down to privacy policy in a lot of ways, right? What they say they will do with that information is different than what they say they will do with ChatGPT's website, with stuff you enter into their actual hosted website.
Yeah, it's privacy policy. It's also money, right? Like if I wanted to give each one of those students access to, right, I mean, because they get access to 4.0, like whatever the most recent model is, but they're accessing it through through OpenWebUI. If I was like, okay, well, we're going to buy accounts for every single student. Now I'm sending $20 per student to give them
month.
that same per month for that same level of access. I think I put $30 in my OpenAI like API area and told it to renew. It never renewed throughout the entire class. Again, we didn't have all students using it. We told students they could use whatever they want. Like we said, you're more than likely, if you're going to use something, you're probably going to use ChatGPT because it's the big one. So let's annotate that privacy policy. But if you want to use Gemini, if you want to use Claude, if you want to use anything that you want to use, especially like you already signed up for this thing, right? Like you've already made the decision to click that box for yourself. I'm not going to go ask you to like click another box for a different system, right? Sure. Like use what you're finding is helpful and useful in your life. But we did have several people who'd never used anything before, right? And they were maybe skeptical, and they were also maybe having some problems with some tech stuff. So one of the benefits of like I have access to all of your chats is that, so I guess I need to set up this assignment a little bit. So Lance had done this when he taught a similar class in the past. So he had taught a 1 credit AI focused course with students, I think maybe a year prior. Is that right, Lance? And he had done this thing called the query log. So he had students going and using these bots, but then making a log of what they put in, what's the prompt, and then what are the outputs that they're getting from these things. That's one of the problems with these tools, is that they're not social really at all, right? There's no social element to them. So our ability to kind of learn from one another comes down to trying to create that transparency. So that's what he was doing with this query log. And we brought that over into this course. So it's kind of a pain in the butt to go in and copy your prompt and copy each one of the responses and put them into like a Google Doc. ChatGPT makes it really easy for you, and OpenWebUI makes it really easy for you in that you can just hit like a share button and it takes you and gives you the entire thing. We have a lot of students who would try to do that, but I don't know if maybe they deleted the chat afterwards, not realizing that those things are connected to one another. But when I'd go in and get ready to grade, I'd hit the link that they were sharing really their work, right? Like showing their work more than anything. And the link would be dead. Whereas all my people who had decided to use the OpenWebUI, right? I had access to their chat. So if they were talking about, oh, well, I was chatting about this and this and this, and I try to like click on the link and for some reason or another it's dead, I can just go in the back end of the system and look for that.
Sure.
Look for that chat, and there it is, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting kind of, I was going to say knock-on benefit, but depending who you're talking to, also the point, right? Like this is very much the same types of things we have around, like, what about doing work inside or outside of an LMS, right? It's similar to that. Way smaller scale in this case of this is just a system for this one class, but similar, right? In purpose. The kind of thinking privacy policy, it is interesting too, because when I'm thinking about privacy personally, like when I'm using these tools, I'm thinking about who has access to the stuff I'm putting in there, and the trade-off I think I'm making, Taylor, is this is going to OpenAI or whatever company is hosting this thing, or it's going to maybe the same people under a different privacy policy, or maybe it's something I'm running locally and it's not going anywhere. But in a lot of ways, in a class situation, that changes the power dynamic, right? A lot, because a student may not be so concerned about being, one of millions of people using this thing versus one of 30 people using a thing that their teacher has access to. Did that come up at all? Were students concerned about that or have any role in this?
I mean, my experience in it was no, and I think because we were like, again, we tried to be transparent from the beginning of like,
Sure.
Autumn, was what I loved about Autumn was like she was very able to like clearly explain and thoughtfully like walk the students how to get set up, but then also be like, listen, we can pull back the curtain. So in doing that, really strongly advocate for them to, I remember her telling them to, or just reminding them, like, if you just, whatever you put in here, like, we're going to see. So just be thoughtful about what it is. And that came through, regularly through the course of just this continued reminder of if they're using our tool, great. Just keep that in mind. And if you're using these other tools, like doubly so. But I think it was especially because some of our students were concerned about the anonymous entity versus the known entity. And so like, the idea that it was us versus, well, I don't know about those other those other companies. And we had people who had concerns about what information is out there about them. So that was from my experience. I don't know, Autumn, if you saw or recall any other outliers.
I feel like we didn't get as much of that because we were so vocal about that, right? Like this isn't about you not using or not using one system over another system holistically. This is about empowering you to have nuance and know, like, this is something I don't want my professor to see. So I'm going to go use the temporary chat on ChatGPT, right? Because I have some other things, but this is something that my professor specifically asked me to do. It's for this assignment. And so I'm going to use this other system that they, I've never, if a student were to come to me and be like, I don't trust that because you can see it, great, because that means you understand that I can see it, right? Like that's wonderful. Like it's all about you understanding the data, understanding the way that the data flows and making informed decisions based on that understanding. So that was almost a learning outcome of the course, to tell you the truth. So I don't know if we had too many students that were like expressing like fear around that, because I think we framed it more as agency.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'll add, like, it's also, I think, an element of College Unbound, which, like this class, I think we had 15 students, and that's like the maximum for courses. Is like it's also a smaller course, and there's intentional elements of the curriculum that like really build on relationship rich learning and connections between faculty and students. So I don't want to pretend like, they just completely trusted us because that's the program, but that's certainly part of the atmosphere, is that, feeling like your faculty or your allies, not your enemies.
Yeah.
And I think there's a design element too, in terms of we're not forcing you, we're giving you another option, right? Yeah. We're not requiring that you sign up for any one system. We're letting you choose what you want to sign up for. And here's an option if you have some concerns about, these creating an account with this, this bigger entity, unknown entity. So.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like it's very much that decision making is the point, right? Like, or at least one of the points, in making sure that they, as much as possible, can make an informed decision, know what's appropriate for what, right? As you mentioned. So how many folks do you think or I should start with what types of assignments what types of things were you asking them to do in, you know, OpenWebUI or ChatGPT or whatever other language model?
I mean, with the, I think the query log was, and I think did we rename it in this course? But that was really a good place to get them just playing, like constructive play. Like they kind of had, you know, they could go and use these tools however they want, but part of the query log was like, we want you to interact it with in this way. And so some of it was like, you know, ask it a bunch of questions about stuff, you know, and rate its answers. So some of it was like just conceptualizing and understanding the tool, and then starting to help them think about how might you utilize this? Like, and so starting to understand more of, like, there was some, we spent some time, probably a little more than we originally anticipated, around just like trying to build that literacy around effective prompting, and then trying to lean into like, what would it then mean if you were to create a customized GPT or your own chatbot? Like, how could that work how could you use that for the work that you're doing or your project? And then I'm trying to think, what were some of the others? Blanking on others. Autumn, do you have?
Yeah, I'm actually going back to the course, looking, because I'm like, what are all the? It's been like several months since we've, you know, asked them to do stuff. So we asked them to do the evaluate for accuracy. That's where we asked them, okay, you're an expert in something. Like maybe it's even, you know, a comic book that you read or a TV show that you like, right? But ask the bot about something that you know about, and then evaluate the accuracy of it. Some of the other ones, we asked it to try to do like to try to change the conversational aspects with it, to not just use it as a question and answer, right? Because we're also used to Googling, right? We're also used to when we're looking for information, using a Google search, right? Like I have a specific thing that I'm looking for, go out there and kind of get it. So instead of doing that, to try to brainstorm with it, try to get it to have a conversation with you. And then once you get it to the point where it can kind of, you know, have a little bit of a back and forth with you, see how much control you can have over the way that it talks to you. Can you change its tone of voice? Can you change the way that, you know, talk like a pirate or something, right? Those kind of things. Looking through some of the other ones that we had here.
I love the how fast can we get this model to talk like a pirate without using the words "talk like a pirate" as a metric. That's a new bench.
Oh, that would be fun.
Be a new
yeah,
AI benchmark of that.
I like that.
And then we had like we did a lot of stuff with like revising what they'd already done, right? That's a big part of any kind of prompting. Like, okay, you did this thing last week, and maybe you weren't so happy with some of the results that you got. How could you make it better, right? How could you come back and do something a little bit better with that?
Did you notice any patterns in like, I know that probably most students were using ChatGPT, and at the time it might have been 3, 5, or 4. I don't know which ones were free, and I'm sure students had access to various levels of things. And I think you mentioned in OpenWebUI you had it configured for 4.0, which I think at the time was effectively the best model that you could get. It kind of still is at a reasonable price. So was there any like stumbling blocks or patterns and differences you noticed there of like, oh, this is answering this type of assignment in a certain way, or is it pretty similar given that they're fundamentally similar?
Oh, you mean between systems? So like we
Yeah.
had one student who was using like Claude, and we had another student using OpenWebUI,
Yeah,
and
you're
another
like,
one using ChatGPT.
Claude tends to, we're having a hard time with this assignment in Claude, or something like that. Or is it, not, I suppose these are open-ended, so maybe not really relevant, but.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed. I also know, like, that was one of the areas again where I don't think we got as much, like, we didn't get as much into the model differences conversation. And I do think, like, if we, like, that's an interesting piece, especially now I'm thinking about, because now every tool has several models,
Yeah.
and some of those tools have their own model and several of the other. Like, I'm thinking about Perplexity, where it's like you have Perplexity, but you can also do Claude, and you can also do DeepSeek. So I do think that's an interesting question that we'll have to start thinking more about as we're talking and working with students, is understanding and starting to view the tools a little bit differently, or to realize, like, which will make sense for which task.
The one place where maybe we saw a little bit of that, so we did get to a point where so I think I made this into a custom GPT. It actually developed from a class that I taught, a first year seminar that I taught at University of Michigan Dearborn. It was a first year seminar, and so we did I was co-teaching it with somebody, Pamela Todoroff, and she wanted to do a interview assignment. People are very familiar with these, right? It's a great first year seminar kind of assignment. Go out and find somebody who works in the field that you want to work in, and interview them. It's a great assignment. It's a great way to get students to connect with people in the community and things like that. The problem with it is that professionals are busy. And actually getting on their calendar and being able to sit down with them, having a student, right? Like, hey, will you give me some time, right? Like that can be hard for them. And so we ended up in a situation where some of the students had their interviews and some of the students didn't. And we were ready to move on to talking about how you synthesize information, how do you put information together, how do you pull from the research as well as your interview information and write something about it. And so it was really hard for some of those students to do that without having that interview data. So I wrote a kind of complex prompt that was, I don't even know, it's maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs long, something like that. And it was basically be a professional, the user will tell you who they want to, what kind of professional they want to interview. And I had students tweak it. And then I made a custom GPT out of it. It worked pretty well. It'll just basically have a conversation with you and pretend to be a computer programmer or a nurse or whatever it is that you want, right? But those kind of complex prompts, I think, don't work so well between systems. You can kind of fine tune them and customize them for ChatGPT. If you take that same prompt and put it into Claude, not so great. They have a tendency, one big mistake that they often make is, instead of pretending and doing that back and forth for you, they'll just generate an interview where they do both the questions and the responses, right? It's just like a transcript of an interview. No, that's not what I want. So I think we experienced maybe a little bit of that. And the students were kind of blown away by that. We were doing really simple prompting before that, when we got into here's a prompt that's several paragraphs long. And we did it kind of live with them, and we said, what do you think is going to happen here? And they were sort of like, whoa, we didn't think it would work.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. Yeah. We had some definitely oh shit moments. Oops, I don't know if I can say that too late.
You're fine. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, where people are at with these tools. I think it's easy to kind of buy the marketing or whatever. I don't know. It's not even always marketing, but just the narrative, let's say, of oh yeah, everyone's already using these tools for X, Y, and Z. All students are cheating on all assignments with these tools with X, Y, of these types. Did you find that You've alluded to already, but where was your class at? Was it wildly different? Was there everyone kind of knew how to use these things? I know it's about exploring it. Where were students at with this stuff?
I think it was kind of all over the map. Like we had the student that Lance was talking about who's already using it in, his job. And then we had a lot of students, and it was the bell curve that you usually sort of get, right? Where we had the, big chunk of students in the center who were using it, but maybe not using it the best ways. And then we had those who were actively like, oh, I heard about that stuff, but I'm kind of afraid of it. And I've been wanting to talk, check it out, but I don't know about isn't it going to take all my data, and isn't it going to learn about me and then do a bunch of weird stuff to me and things like that. I think it was pretty mixed. What did you think, Lance?
Yeah, I feel like there was we had those one or two probably early adopters in many ways, and then a lot of folks who probably used it but didn't necessarily fully understand the depths of how to use it, or how to use it, what you can really get out of it if you're starting to really dig into it. And then as you said, folks who are either skeptical or just hadn't encountered it, or were associating, or not, they were aware of your AI pre-ChatGPT, but they weren't really sure of the distinctions of what was before generative AI, what we called AI a decade ago and what we're calling it now.
There was a lot of conflation between AI and targeted advertising, AI and data collection, all of those kind of things were, there wasn't, the students didn't necessarily have, that's one of the things I hope they got out of the class, right, was being able to maybe use those terms in a little bit more of a specific way.
Were any challenges you ran into in getting students to start using this stuff? Given that some folks hadn't used it before, were there common stumbling blocks, or what kinds of things did you run into?
I would say just I think the thing, and still at times where in the aftermath thinking about, is just helping them understand what an answer is from an AI. Really trying to navigate the tendency for anthropomorphizing, and because there was things felt very, the responses feel very robust, or they can, what's in there is reflected in students' experiences. And so I think for some of them, because they had not been exposed to it as much, and also the background understanding of what the tool is, the technical understanding, which so many of us are struggling with to not just understand, but to be able to discuss. I think that was something that was a stumbling block. And then I think just, again, really understanding the dialogic nature of it, and using that to be able to go back and forth to improve the outputs, or the answers that it gives. What about you, Autumm?
Yeah, I think that the dialogic piece was definitely a hurdle. We got there with some folks, we didn't get there with others. Some maybe we got through too much with, but he did have some instances. It was because the bot can seem, depending on how you're prompting, if you're especially asking from like a more personal, your personal experience, if you're asking it to give you feedback on like personal experience, it can feel very empathetic, right? It can feel very much like you're talking to a friend if you're looking for somebody to recognize. And we saw a little bit of that, and, had to reflect a little bit critically about what's really going on here. Like, it's not really empathizing with you, right? It's, there's something else going on there. But trying to just, help them to understand the technical piece that was going on in the background and how that was manifesting in these answers that they were getting was a big part of that.
Yeah, and it's such a difficult thing to do, and I feel like the more I think about this type of thing, I was going to say learn about it, but I'm not 100% sure I've learned that much about how these things work as someone who is like stopped at Calc 1 level math and really did not get Calc 1. But the more I think about it, the more I evaluate it, the more my, the more questions that come up for me in terms of like, yeah, I do understand empirically that this is a machine, and I understand kind of what it's designed to do and sort of on a very basic level how it works. But it's a machine that can spit out text that appears empathetic in some cases, right? And getting that is one point, but then going beyond that is perhaps the more important thing of like, well, what does that mean? Like, is there a real dark, right? But is there a difference in it depends on context and circumstance between something that appears empathetic and is? Of course, there's a difference, but is there a difference for this purpose? And sometimes, most of the time, I'd say yes. Was that a level, and that's kind of how I think of this stuff sometimes, is that there's that level of understanding of what is happening and then what does that mean. Do you have students getting there? Was that or was that, I mean, this is you have to have a stopping point for what's coverable in a course, but I'm kind of curious if you had students making those realizations and connections.
Feel like they were very skeptical when we brought up that uncanny valley kind of situation, especially around, emotions and things like that. I feel like the character AI situation with the person who unalived himself after talking to the chatbot for an extended period of time, the minor who unalived themselves, right? Like that had just kind of happened when we started the class. And so that was part of the original like reflections. We did a lot of like thinking about the news stories that were coming out and, what we were seeing in popular media and what we were seeing in current events around these kind of things too. So I think though that element of it helped to cast a bit of skepticism from the students on it. But it is, I mean, it's different when you are actually having a conversation with something and it's showing you empathy, like in an area where you need empathy, right? Like that's a very powerful experience. And it's hard to remember sort of where that's coming from in a situation like that. I think we got there, but and I think that there's also maybe something to be said for like you can like consciously and rationally know that, but you also can't deny the fact that you feel heard and you feel seen in some ways, right? Yeah. That maybe you haven't been in the context that you were maybe harmed in those ways. And so it can be a very powerful experience for sure. I do think we got there, but at the same time, I don't know how much separation we can do between the head and the heart in a situation like that.
Well, what we know is that's not an easy thing, nor even necessarily something to shoot for, right? In an objective sense, anyway.
I do think it's probably better for that to happen in a class where you have other people talking, right, than like doing it by yourself in your bedroom, right?
Sure.
So,
I wonder if there's like a way of squaring this. Like it requires a little bit of like abstracting and going up higher levels, but when somebody's feeling or getting that sense of validation from an AI, like that emotional connection, like I do, or feeling seen. Like I wonder, is there a way of trying to describe or explain this as like in the like that feeling is valid, but it's not valid because the AI tool in the moment is doing that, but because it's forming its answer based on that large language model, which means there are other, like it's drawing from other texts of people being recognized. And so like it's a little bit of transference, it's a little bit of like abstracting, but I wonder if a way of talking about it to both, like, I think the validation is important, and also to be like, it's not the AI, but it is coming from somewhere that other people have recognized this kind of context. I'm not, and again, I know there's logical leaps I'm making in that in some ways, but like there's something there for me this conversation is bringing up for me to think about like that piece.
I actually really like that in kind of thinking of it as like the thing I'm drawing here is it is very normal, or at least considered normal, to and definitely me, like as a very I'll say like a textbook adult ADHD person, it can feel good to read or watch something where someone is expressing a problem they've had and how they solved it related to focus or something like that in their job. That happens to me all the time. My TikTok algorithm, when I was using TikTok more, full of it, famously full of it for lots of people, right? And I like that stuff. And I do feel seen. I'm not being seen by anyone. It's a video file being served to my phone. I don't have any... there's maybe a little parasocialness there, even like maybe if I was a particular personality or person that I particularly liked. And I kind of what you're getting at, Lance, makes me think of like maybe I should be lumping, emotional responses I or someone might get from a LLM into that kind of. It's closer to like me seeing something or reading something and saying that's cool, that's relatable or whatever. Then not again because I don't consider this a person I'm conversing with. I'm not under any illusion of that. But it's closer to that other thing of I saw something on the internet and it was interesting than anything. It might be that simple for at least for me personally right now.
I think it's hard though because the actual experience that you're having, right?
Yeah.
Right? So like if it's a parasocial experience with like an influencer, yeah, my subconscious, I mean, we're pattern making beings, right? And so like, yeah, I can put stuff together. Oh, they said this thing that I left a comment and I used this word, right? So when they made the next video and they used that word, they were actually talking to me, right? And I can like make all kinds of little patterns there. But a one-on-one conversation with something that is now knows your situation because you gave it that, right? Because you told it about your situation and is now, using language like, oh, that's a really big problem in the world. And, you're not alone. And there's, you didn't deserve that. And you don't, you deserve to be treated better or like whatever, right? Like that's really difficult to make that leap, I think.
Yeah, and I definitely don't mean lumping it in terms of potential harm.
Sure.
I think this is a whole different ball game in there, right? But you know, I guess I'm not sure where I'm making that distinction in terms of like what level of the experience is similar to that. But I guess what I'm kind of thinking, I've not made that connection between that type of, you know, like I said, I'm thinking of like this is relatable versus I conversed, and also some of this for me is I haven't, as like a technologist, I'm who is not particularly spent a lot of time with large language models and like learning how to do good things with prompts. I treat them almost like search engines. I will put in
Yes.
forward prompts that are garbage and see if it does anything and then maybe refine it, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes I spit literally a line, like for a personal project I was doing some programming stuff and I just put no context put an error code into it, and you know, so that's kind of how I use these things. It's very different for me, but as trying to understand, you know, what folks might get from them, and you know, maybe there can be positive things. I'm very unskeptical, or I'm very skeptical of, you know, I think the insinuation of some folks that this could be part of therapy is very dark to me. I don't love that, but yeah, it's really interesting. A couple things I wanted to bring up. We have some folks in the Discord who are watching, and one thing that I wanted to bring. Mark Corbett Wilson mentioned, and I think he mentioned this in response to me saying. The narrative of, oh, folks are using this and are efficient and students are cheating with it, and he goes, yeah, when staff and faculty and admins use LLMs, they're being efficient, and when students are using it, they're cheating.
Right?
And I just wanted to, yes, I hate that. And I even said it. So
Can I jar on that just quickly?
yeah.
Like part for me of how like all of this work came about was like again, a conversation in December 2022 where Autumm was teaching at College Unbound and reached out to me in my professional role there, where it was like, there's a student who might have been using AI, and like I want to have a conversation about it. And like we got chatting, and like I still remember this. There, like the corner turning, or for me, like all the things that have come since, came from this moment where like we're looking at this, we don't know for sure, but like this, it's like 2.5 weeks out this tool has been around, right? It drops in like November 30th in 2.5 weeks, and like we just had a moment where we're just like, hot damn, right? Like we had this moment where we just kind of smiled, like like way to go, like thinking about the student, like way to go. And I don't know, like I go back to that moment a lot in all of this, and the conversations about students cheating and stuff, and just think about that. Like that always grounds me to remember like students using this for all the concerns we want to have. There's also something powerful about it. There's also something important about it. And so I like to that point, to that conversation, I don't know, that for me has been really keeps me coming back to thinking about how are we engaging with these tools with our students and helping them find what is effective and efficient, even sometimes when it rubs against what we're hoping is the appropriate ways, whatever we want to tell ourselves as.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And you know, we are at the top of the hour. So, is there anything you both wanted to mention before we kind of sign off here that we didn't cover?
I think that was.
I think OpenWebUI is fun. Go install
Yes.
it.
Go try it.
Yes.
Yeah. No, thanks so much, both of you, for joining me here, joining folks who are watching or watching later. Yeah, OpenWebUI is fun. It's I think, interesting tool to explore some of these things. You can, as we mentioned, run it on Reclaim Cloud. The OpenAI credit situation is pretty inexpensive, as you mentioned, Autumn. I will say running OpenWebUI itself on Reclaim Cloud is like, it's like 20 or 30 bucks a month. It's not, it's more expensive than a WordPress site, you know, so there's that to consider too. But it may be an interesting tool for this use case in groups and classes. And thanks so much for sharing so much about what you all did with these types of tools in your class. And I really appreciate your time. So.
It was fun. Thank you so much, Taylor, for supporting us, and Reclaim for hosting for us and all of that. I think that it was a great addition to the course.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, with that, I think we're going to sign off, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.